We seem to be living in a time of uncertainty. Everything feels pretty crazy, whether it be politically or socially. Things just seem to be really unraveling at this point. In fact, Benjamin Franklin said that there's only a couple of things that can be certain, and that's death and taxes. But we're going to look today at God's word in Ecclesiastes 9, and it speaks about this same uncertainty that's been around for thousands of years. And I love how the author describes things and gives us wisdom and understanding of how to deal with these uncertain times. I'm going to be reading from Ecclesiastes 9, 1 through 10 today, and we're going to be just challenged to see what this author says. And I'm going to start off reading from the New Living Translation. You'll see that the ESV is on the left and New Living is in the middle, and some commentary is on the right and stuff. But we're going to be looking at this. Here's what it says, starting at verse 1 of chapter 9. This too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of godly and wise people are in God's hands, no one knows whether God will show them favor. The same destiny ultimately awaits everyone, whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonially clean or unclean, religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners, and people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. It seems so wrong that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. Already twisted by evil, people choose their own mad course, for they have no hope. There's nothing ahead but death anyway. There is hope only for the living. As they say, it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. And I think we can kind of feel this same thing as we're surveying the world in which we're living, that just really has all these uncertainties. We don't know if things are going to go well for us. And it seems like sometimes things go well for wicked people. And it seems like some things are challenging and difficult for those who are righteous. And the thing that we all have in common as humans, though, is that we all have the same destiny. One out of one people die, right? That is really what we can be sure of. With all these different uncertainties that we see, that's what we can really be sure of. And we know that the writer of Ecclesiastes, he's been going through all these different things that he's noticed, and he calls it a vanity, a hevel, a chasing after the wind, because he's looked around the world and he's tried all these different things, pursuits of happiness, pursuits of money, pursuits of building stuff, all these things he's tried to accomplish. And at the end of the day, he's making these observations that many of us get really frustrated over, is that in the end, we don't know what's going to happen with us. We don't know if things are going to go well. We don't know if things are going to go bad. We don't know what tomorrow holds. And sometimes it seems like the people who should be getting bad things happen to them, great things happen to them, and those who we know are good people and stuff, we see difficult things happen. It doesn't make always sense. And so we see him making these comments and observations and stuff, and he says, sometimes it just seems wrong. And what motivates us then to do what's right? Right? If the same fate is coming to us, what is it that motivates us? I love how it says in verse 3, it seems so wrong that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. Like, it just doesn't seem right sometimes. Already twisted by evil, people choose their own mad course, for they have no hope. And I think we're seeing our world, and specifically in our country, we're seeing people who are lacking hope. Right? You read comments on Facebook and stuff, and they're commenting on what they're seeing happening politically and people towards one another, and it really seems kind of hopeless at times. And when we put these little glimpses of a hope in a person, they always seem to fail. They always seem to let us down, and we just see that. And then the ultimate equalizer is that the end result is the same for everyone anyway. Whether a person lives a long life, whether they live a short life, whether they've done good things, whether they've done bad things, death is this ultimate equalizer, right? Part of the end part of verse 3. There's nothing ahead but death anyway. But verse 4 says this: there is hope only for the living. As they say, it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. Okay, and they probably would have seen dogs and lions maybe a little bit different than us. because a lot of us, we really love our dogs, and um, and we don't really have context for lions, but they would have kind of seen dogs as a lesser creature, and lions as this, the king of, the king of the jungle type of stuff, um, and they would have really seen lions elevated and dogs kind of lower. But he's saying here, it's better at least to be alive, right? At least if you're breathing, if you've woken up today, that at least is something, right? And it's trying to make sense of all this stuff. At least life is something. Okay, verse 5, here's where it moves on. It says, the living at least know they will die, but the dead know nothing. Okay, and he's making some comments, because we don't really know what happens in the afterlife. The Bible gives us some understanding. It makes some certain comments on stuff that we see in the New Testament, but he's kind of making his case here that what we know is right in front of us. That's all we can really know for sure, with certainty, right? Because the certainty is that we're all going to end up with the same fate, but also what we know is what's in front of us, what we're living, what we're experiencing, what we're seeing with our own eyes, and we smell, and our senses, and all that kind of stuff. And so verse 5, it says, the living at least know they will die, but the dead know nothing. Right, so at least we know something. Okay, they have no further reward, nor are they remembered. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they don't have some kind of future reward, potentially with God or something. He's just saying, like they don't see it. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what their experience is. Okay, and so according to the people here, um, the people who are alive and stuff, things get forgotten. Verse 6, it says, whatever they did in their lifetime, loving, hating, envying, is all long gone. Okay, whether it was good or bad, whether it was impactful or unimpactful, whether it was short or long, okay, it's all gone. They no longer play a part in anything here on earth. So as far as the realm of the earth goes, they're not part of it anymore. They're just gone. And this is something that I know is true in dealing with, the death of my dad, passing away a little over 3 years ago. Um, and then both my grandmas have also passed away in the last 3 years as well. My one grandma just a few months ago, and they're just gone. And there's this like real reality of the loss, of the sense of finality in that. They're not coming back. And so whatever they did, like verse 6, whatever they did in their lifetime, loving, hating, whatever it was, good or bad, but it's done. It's final. They no longer play a part in anything here on earth. Okay, so then he's going to give some thoughts here. Okay, so if that's all true, right? If that's all true, that we the finality of death, and we don't know what's after, and all that kind of stuff. Here's what the author says. So go ahead, eat your food with joy, drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Right? He's trying to say, hey, go about your life, because the one thing that we control, the one thing that we get to do is live the next day. And so if we're going to live the next day, we might as well live it. Okay. And he's not just saying be necessarily a straight out pleasure seeker, right? Because he said he'd already tried that, right? He'd tried it with, all the pursuits of pleasure, of women and money and building stuff and knowing things. And he said, that didn't fulfill him. That didn't did it. That was just, that still that hevel and stuff. But he says, here's what we have though. Here's the thing that we have in our life. Okay, eat your food with joy. Okay, live out the moments that God has given you. Whether or not you understand what's going on, but he says the best that we can do is understand that we can, eat our food with joy, drink our wine with a happy heart, right? Or what we eat, what we do. This is God approves of this. Wear fine clothes. Put your clothes on. Smell nice. And he goes on. Verse 9, he says, live happily with the women you love, through all the meaningless days of life that God has given you under the sun. And we get this sense in here that we don't have to understand everything to enjoy life. We don't have to have it all figured out, right? Because earlier, remember, he talked about these limits to even wisdom. He's like, live wise because it's better than living like a fool, and live in this sense that, man, I'm going to enjoy the stuff that God has given me, but also knowing that I can't find it all in those things, right? So if you're married, verse 9, live happily with your wife, okay, or your husband or your family, right? He's not trying to really put it in a box. He's just kind of describing a general life. Okay, live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless days of life that God has given you under the sun. The wife God gives you is your reward for all your earthly toil. Okay, verse 10, whatever you do, do well. It reminds me of the verse in the New Testament. It says, whatever you do, whether you eat or drink or sleep, do it all for the glory of God. This is like that path that you just fix your eyes on and say, this is the direction I'm going to go. I'm going to go and I'm going to do it well. Okay, because the last part is, for when you go to the grave, there will be no work or planning or knowledge or wisdom. Because it'll be that final thing that happens to you. So what does it look like to whatever you do to do well? Okay, in the ESV it says this: whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. Do it with your might. And I think there's an assumption in here that because this person is connected with God and his relationship with God, he would say, your pursuit of God is needs to be the thing that defines your life. And so everything that you do in life flows through that. Whatever you do it well. Do it with all your might. Because that's what we can do. That's what we can offer. That's what we can engage in, is to say, I'm going to live a life and I'm going to give it all. I'm going to leave it all on the floor. So with a a sports metaphor, I'm going to leave it all on the floor. I'm going to leave it all on the court. I'm going to leave it all on the field. I'm going to do it with all my might. It reminds me of Gomer the van. So when I was an associate pastor working with teens and youth and college students at the Rock, um, we had this church van, and the church van, we named it Gomer. It was just like a Gomer type of van. If you could think of a Gomer type of person, it was like a Gomer van. And we were doing this missions trip down to Mexico, and literally we didn't even make it out of town before the thing broke down. So we're like literally driving out of town, and it was like a 25-hour drive from Nampa, Idaho, all the way down to Mexico, and didn't even make it out of out of Nampa, and the thing breaks down. So we veer off, go and found this mechanic, and sit there for a couple hours. He's fixing it, and then we take off and we go all the way down to Mexico, and I think it increased all of our prayer life for for getting down there. There's all sorts of things with that van. It was just on its last leg and stuff. And so we're coming back. I think we broke down somewhere in Utah again. Literally, like, lay hands on this thing and pray for it, and we get it home, and we're literally driving into the parking lot of where our office was, and we drive in, and as we're like getting to the parking thing, like, the van dies right as we're coasting in, right? We traveled 25 hours each way, and it dies coasting in, and it, like, as far as I know, that thing never started again in its life. And I don't know if we scrapped it or got rid of it or something. But Gomer the van, did his thing. And I was just kind of thinking of that while I'm reading this verse. Whatever you do well, for when you go to the grave, there will be no work, right? It's like, man, get all the way to the end and expend your life doing the things of God, and doing them well, doing them with all your might, giving it everything that you have. And we know that in the New Testament, we see the story of Jesus, of how he came And he like lived this way, right? Eat your food with joy, drink, right? You can picture Jesus going to these places. He's this friend of sinners, and he was hanging out with people and going to weddings and invited to these places and having people over to homes and breaking bread and eating together with the disciples and the other people that were joining him. And he was just like living this out. But in the end, whatever you do well. And he did well, and he did it with all of his might, and he left it literally his life, he left it hanging in the balance for my sin, for your sin, so that we could be right with him, so that we could be empowered then to whatever we do well, empowered with the life of Christ and dwelt by the Spirit of the living God. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. And that's our challenge, because we can't control what's going on around us. We can't control what's going to happen politically. We can't control what's happening socially. Maybe there's some things that we can do to bring about justice and make our little pieces that we're engaged with better. But ultimately, we want to expend our lives and say, man, I'm going to live out my life for the sake of Christ. And I'm going to do it with all of my might. I'm going to do it with everything that I have in me. And I'm going to live my life for Jesus. And this is what it looks like to be his follower. This is what it looks like to live a life that has meaning and purpose in an uncertain, crazy world that we live in, where everything else might be just getting destroyed around us. But we can just do these simple things like, man, I'm just gonna live the life that God has before me, and I'm gonna do it to the best that I can for the purposes that God has called me. Okay, and it's not just living, well, I'm just gonna eat my food and do right. It's living with intentionality that says, what does God have for me this day? And I'm gonna walk with him, and I'm gonna do it with all my might, and I'm gonna do it with intentionality, and I'm gonna live my life so that at the very end, when the grave comes, right, I'll have spent every last um, ounce of energy living my life with purpose, with intention, just like Gomer the van.